Good morning. Good morning.
Straight up.
Straight up. Okay, David, are you good back there with tech? We have some people on Zoom this morning? Three, good, okay. All right. Well, Angela Davis once said, "It is in collectives that we find reservoirs of hope and optimism." So as I ring the bowl this morning, may we join in gratitude for each other's presence here this morning and for the existence of this blessed community. Thank you, Michael. Well, good morning and welcome members, friends, and visitors to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. We are an intentional community gathered around our mission to support each other's individual spiritual journeys and to inspire, inform, and support all who seek a more equal and just community. I'm Nancy Holland, your service leader this morning, joined by Michael at the piano. Thank you, David from our tech team in the rear, and all the other staff and volunteers, as noted in your order of service, who make this Sunday and every Sunday possible. We are grateful to all of you. And I'm pleased to welcome back to our podium this morning, Reverend Bob Clegg. He's no stranger to UUCR. I'm sure most of you remember Bob from several prior visits. In the past, he's been a member of the UU congregation of Frederick, Maryland. He holds a Master's of Divinity from Wesley Theological Seminary and has been the executive director of an organization, Justice Jobs, in Frederick, Maryland. And while he's continuing that position, he has recently moved to South Carolina and is making his home there. So he was back in the area for this week, and we are glad that you fit us in. Thank you. And Bob's talk this morning is Why I Must Be an Optimist. So again, welcome to all of you who are here in person or on Zoom this morning. as we strive to widen our circle and welcome everyone to the UUCR. I think just have one announcement. There is a potluck this Friday hosted by Lynn and Paula. Thank you. 6 o'clock here at the church. Just bring a dish to share. So these are wonderful opportunities to just be together in community. So I hope everyone will try to come. Also, I'm just going to make my little plea as a former nurse. I heard on the news the other night that only 35% of the public has received the latest COVID vaccine, which is not really considered a booster, it's a new vaccine. So COVID is on the rise again, and so I urge anyone who maybe hasn't gotten it to think about getting it. Okay, and now we'll light the chalice. The words are in your order of service. We light this chalice as a symbol of light within our creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts. And now please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 1, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, number 361.
How many verses?
Oh.
There are 5 written.
All 5? Okay. Well, it's kind of short, so. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Woo, well done. Good energy level. Okay, yeah. Okay, so Reverend Bob's talk this morning has to do with optimism. So I was just curious, how many of you consider you're the glass half full type person? And how many the glass half empty? How many of you think, have you changed over time, do you think? Well, that's true too. Okay. Well, in honor of all of us, words by Amanda Schubert, in honor of the risk takers, those who hold the vision with clarity and charge forward with optimism, even in the face of others' doubts. You are our lamplighters and our guides. May we never forget the courage it takes to lead the way forward. In honor of the cautious skeptics, those that gather the information needed to navigate the tumultuous waters of change. You are the map makers and the preparers of the stores. May we appreciate your attention to the details that keep us on our course. In honor of the doubters, those who may fear the changing tides of a turbulent world, you are our anchors and remind us of where we have been and where we are in community now. May we relish your commitment to our history and your passion for who we have become. In honor of the dreamers, those that imagine what we can be to and in this world, you are the wind that blows the sails of change, pushing us ever forward. May we revel always in your whimsy and hope that dares us to never stop becoming. May the work we do together strengthen our community and the world. Together, we wield a powerful spirit that is strengthened by the gifts of us all. Blessed be. And now, this is the time in our service we hold for acknowledgments of the heart, when we can share our joys and concerns. I will light the first candle this morning, as we often do, in honor of all those who are facing war, natural disasters in this world, and injustice anywhere. And anyone who would like to come up and light a candle, please come up. Have a joy.
My son David just got word that Jim Lavin fell yesterday and wasn't able to be here. I don't have any more details of that. I don't know anything more than that he fell and is not being able to be here. So anyway, this is for Jim.
I'll hold Jim in our hearts. Oh my goodness, it's a quiet Sunday. I'll light a candle for I have two granddaughters
Well, I'm,
who are cousins.
I think we have Jim.
Oh, okay.
and
Yes.
I'm okay. Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it. I'm okay.
Good to hear your voice, Jim. I'll light one for my two granddaughters. They're cousins. They're a month apart. And they're both seniors in high school, and they are waiting to hear from colleges. So, yes, Connie.
I wasn't going to do this because it may embarrass my husband, but when you talked about Jim Lavin falling, some of you know that my husband fell in 2021, and it was the worst year of our lives. But in the last 3 or 4 months, there has been this wonderful, subtle change, and he is talking more and doing more. He signed up for college, for the classes at Washington College, the WCL classes, and I am blessed and so grateful, and we'll pray for Jim.
Congratulations, Larry. That's great news. Oh, now we're going. Okay.
It just takes a little while to get warmed up, especially on a cold day. I just want to light a candle for those in the waterfront communities that had the third highest flooding in history last week. There is a lot of people that are trying to clean up water. You know, you could kayak through part of Rock Hall. Down my back road was one of the places. But for the most part, everybody looks like they've come through okay. And now we just have to do the mold and mildew work.
This is a candle lit for Jim. I went to Jim Trumbauer's funeral Friday. I knew Jim through most rebuilding together. We were in the same fitness enhancement. And And I found out, testing, okay.
Keep that with the sweetest batteries.
And I found out, lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. But, yeah, so I learned, what I came away with was, wow, I wish I had gotten to know this man better. And my next thought had to do with, gee, he was younger than I was. We were in the same fitness class. And it makes me think a lot about my own mortality, as I'm sure most of all of you have gone thinking about those things yourself. So optimism as growing age is something I want to hear about. I really do. Thank you.
Well, for those joys and concerns that were shared, as well as those we may still be holding in our hearts, let us take a moment of silence. Blessed be. And again, please rise in body or spirit for spirit of life. And as we care for each other here today, let us also care for this church, its missions and programs, by giving as you can, for we are now the keepers of the flame. For your gifts generously given, we are most grateful. Thank you. And now, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Bob.
Thank you, Nancy. Our own mortality is something that, as I look out across this congregation and back at this pulpit, it seems like this is the time of life when people start going to church again. And lots of you have been there. My father-in-law, when he had cancer, started going back to church. And my wife asked her dad, what, have you become a Christian or something? And he said, oh, no, nothing like that. She says, well, why do you go? He was going to a little Baptist church out in the country. And he said, it just makes me feel better. That's plenty enough reason to be here. I'm going to cheat. I have an app that is called the We Croak app. We Croak. The icon for it is a picture of an upside down frog. And the idea is that the Bhutanese say, according to the app, that if you meditate on your own demise 5 times a day, you will become enlightened. I'm not looking for enlightenment from my meditation anymore. I'd settle for 10% happier. And so a couple of days ago, a quote came through on the We Croak app from Mark Twain. And Mark Twain reportedly said, I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and never suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. So think about that. A reflection on an experience that happened to me about 25 years ago. It was one of these watershed ethical experiences in my life. While I was doing my postdoc at Caltech, I attended a talk by Dr. Richard Ernst. It was supposed to last for an hour and a half, and he was supposed to talk about his research. His team developed the MRI from a physical chemistry technique called nuclear magnetic resonance. And that's a very, very important and useful technique for chemical analysis. And they had developed this in the 1990s. He had gotten, I think he had gotten in the 80s, he had gotten the Nobel Prize in 91, I think, for chemistry, for the MRI. He was speaking there that day receiving the Pauling Medal at Caltech, which pales by comparison to the Nobel Prize, of course. It's basically something that the Caltech community uses to bring people in and create a press release. But he was speaking to us, faculty, administration, and students there in the Pauling lecture room at Caltech, which was named for Linus Pauling, who had won Nobels in both peace and chemistry. In his address, in accepting the Pauling Medal, Dr. Ernst went on for 3 hours instead of the hour and a half. And for the first hour and a half, he said, I'm going to do something different. I want to talk to the students and the postdocs here and explain to you what really happened with Dr. Pauling. It's ironic that the Caltech community is now giving the Pauling Medal because in the early 60s, Pauling was ostracized from the Caltech community for his stand on, it's a very conservative academic community there and still is, for his stand on anti-war and anti-nuke. And in 1963, the local Pasadena paper, which is also quite conservative to this day, quoted Caltech's president as saying, what do I think of Dr. Pauling? I really wish you'd just go away. And he eventually did resign. He was isolated. He resigned his long-held position there and could not get a job anywhere in academia. This is the great Dr. Pauling who figured out protein structure, 3D protein structure. And only when anti-war politics became popular did he get a job at Stanford. In that talk, Dr. Ernst used Dr. Pauling's story to make the point to us students and postdocs. He said, as you go out from here, consider what's right and what's wrong, and choose your projects and the companies you work for carefully and with ethical considerations in mind. He said science has not always been the driver. It's also been consumerism and militarism and other isms that have driven the progress towards the ecological state that we're in now. But he said, we've at least been a complicit co-conspirator. And choose a field, a company, and research projects where you can help repair the damage that we have caused, or at least choose a field where you can do no harm, which has been a general philosophical principle since Hippocrates inserted it into the Hippocratic Oath, where it remains today. With my training, Dr. Ernst's talk left just a few directions for me to go, and I considered those things as I chose jobs to apply for. And I ended up going, because of that, it went into biological sensors. A couple of reasons. First of all, it's aqueous chemistry. It's biological generally, so it does less ecological damage. And also because it's really hard to make an offensive sensor, if you think about it, an offensive medical sensor as well. So that choice brought me to Maryland to work at Mesoscale Discovery for 15 years. And there I got to play minor roles in developing 2 sensors that helped members of my immediate family. So the circle of quality can be very short, unbeknownst to the player. But that choice also led Connie and me to move to New Market, where I found UUCF, a congregation of Frederick. And from there, it was just a few connections to serving you here at UUCR. I would not be here today if it not had been for that moment. And really, probably every moment of our lives could be seen that way, but sometimes there are watershed ethical moments, and that's the point. It was a few years later, I recognized this and sent a gratitude letter to Dr. Ernst in Switzerland, and he had he was lovely enough to send me an email response in which he said, "Thank you very much for letting me know about that. It's nice to know that my unusual teaching methods sometimes work." Nice man. In the extended moment of silence that follows, if you would like something to think about, consider what are some of the watershed ethical moments in your life where if they had not happened, everything would have turned out differently. The topic this morning was suggested a few months ago by a member at the UU congregation of the Chesapeake, where I filled the pulpit about 3 months ago. And after the sermon, we were doing a congregational response like you do here. And one of the members, we were talking about ethics, and one of the members sort of got stuck verbally and got frustrated, like some of us often do. And in her frustration, she just blurted out, "Well, what the hell is ethics anyway?" And we laughed and we went on, but she set me to thinking about the importance of ethics in our lives. This morning, I'd like to share with you some thoughts, primarily about what I will call existentialism. Well, I was not going there. Existential ethics, so matters of life and death, not existentialism. We'll save that for another day. Also about non-existential ethics, things that may not be matters of life and death to the whole world, but if they're matters of meaning, they're still, it's kind of a misnomer really, but they're still existential for a person or even two or three. By these terms, I mean ethics, I mean the principles by which we determine right from wrong. So that's our ethics. That's not our values. Our values derive from our ethics and can change with the situation. But those principles hopefully remain in place for a long time, if not forever. We're talking about, for a good list of ethical principles, perhaps. I think we have them on the back of our order of service, right? Yes, we do. We affirm and promote these 7 principles. My first day as in a UU congregation, I checked down through there, check, and I was like, well, wow, where have these people been for the last 40 years? And I asked someone, and she said, we've been right here waiting for you. But they really hadn't been waiting. They had been busy, right? And what had they been busy doing? Careers in volunteerism, things that UUs tend to be good at because we place a prime importance on what we do rather than what we think or believe. Questions like, what career direction should I take, or what volunteerism should I do, they're obviously important. And to make the best life choices, we need to make a choice between what's right and what's wrong for us, as Dr. Ernst urged us all to do back there at Caltech. Many issues of right and wrong are now paramount for the entire human race, right? Because they become issues of mortality for the whole of humanity. We're really in an adolescent stage, if you think in terms of the progression of our species, the socialization of our species. We've got the ability to kill ourselves off, and maybe we lack the collective maturity and collective thoughtfulness to restrain ourselves from just doing just that. So we're working on that we're still definitely a work in process, and the jury's still out. There's a huge list of interconnected issues where humanity needs to make right choices in order to survive. And that list is enough to make our heads spin. For example, there's human-caused climate change, overpopulation, environmental degradation, proliferation, rogue arterial artificial intelligence, right? Antibiotic resistance could wipe us out, social and political instability, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. It's not, I thought we were going to be optimistic here today, and that's as deep as we're going to get, right? The list just goes on. That's about a third of my list. But my point this morning, though, is not to talk about all of those things or really to focus on the negatives of any one of them, but to make the point, and this is my thesis, which is debatable, the news is not all bad. And I will attempt to support that thesis in the next few minutes. The news is not all bad. We can take heart that people are working on every single one of those problems right now. If you rate the survival of our species as important, and you can argue that pro and con depending on how cynical you are, but I think most people would argue pro, then these become important existential problems for us to tackle as a career or as an avocation today. In his book, What We Owe the Future, philosopher William McCaskill, who looks like he may be about 25 years old, he's at Harvard, and he's brilliant. He writes about choosing one's career or one's volunteer activities as an ethical choice, as a think about it choice. He points out that people often choose a career because it's a topic that's close to their heart. And that certainly resonates with me at Justice Jobs, where I've been for the last 5.5 years, and where we have an incoming executive director who is brilliant and who will continue that work, and I'm grateful about that. In that job and in that jobs office, in founding and developing that, we help people get jobs when they're experiencing barriers to employment. Why did I choose that? It's probably no coincidence that when I was 25 years old, I'd been homeless for 3 years, and somebody helped me get a job. So perhaps I did what I did there for that 5 years at Justice Jobs because I identify with people in that situation. But I did that because it was a matter that was close to my heart. That doesn't make it wrong, it doesn't make it bad, but perhaps there's a place where I could be more effective. And as we move to South Carolina and I'm thinking about, okay, what's my next career, what's my next volunteer activities, my next effort, maybe I need to systematically choose my career, McCaskill says, by evaluating where my efforts might be most effective rather than what might mean the most to me. Where might I, with my experience, where might you, with your experience and life experiences and skills and knowledge, where might you be most effective? I'm not going to do a whole book report about McCaskill's book, but anybody who's considering a future vocation or vocational or avocational change, I would suggest reading it. It's called What We Owe the Future. I'm going to focus for the rest of this time on the example of human-caused climate change, which headed our list a few minutes ago, and just use that as an example. And the good news about existential ethics, the life and death ethics of climate change, is that we are beginning to make progress, at least in our ethical choices. There is some progress. The bottom line of atmospheric CO2 levels is going to come later. It was last summer that Al Gore pointed out that clean energy, his words, clean energy is cheaper than ever. Electric vehicle sales are surging and governments are subsidizing those sales, at least for now. He said, we know how to fix this. We can stop the temperatures from going up worldwide with as little as a 3-year time lag by reaching net zero carbon emissions. And if we stay at true net zero, half of the human-caused CO2 will come out of the atmosphere in as little as 30 years. That's encouraging to me. We know how to do this. It's just a matter of the will. He says, goes on to say that, or I would say that the challenge is getting there to net zero. In that same interview, Gore criticized oil and gas companies and rich countries like the United States for clinging to the veto power over language calling for a phase down of fossil fuels. What are we doing with that? He says the climate crisis is mainly a fossil fuels crisis. If the world is not allowed to discuss phasing down fossil fuels because the fossil fuel companies don't want us to talk about it, then that's a very flawed process. So that's something to work on. Now, if you're as old or older than I am, you may be thinking that I've been speaking to anyone younger in this room, those who are younger. That's not the entire case. Just because you're my age or older is no reason to say my time has passed, I've missed that boat, he's talking to the young folks, he's not talking to me. I'm really not disappointed. I get silently angry when I hear people my age say things like, I'm glad I won't be around to see what's going to happen in the next 50 years. And maybe they're just being honest. Maybe they don't mean anything to be offensive. Maybe they're just plain old depressed and being honest about the way that they feel this world is in. So I have some understanding of that so I can conjure up some compassion. But you can count me in with Al Gore on this one. I'm not ready to give up yet. It's not time to give up yet. There is a source of optimism or informed opinion that I preached at length about here a year ago this month. Kim Stanley Robinson, science fiction writer, he's really been described as a science fiction, nonfiction writer. He's science fiction because his stuff happens in the future in his novels, not so far into the future that it becomes irrelevant, but there it is. And it's science fiction, nonfiction because he gets his topics for how in his books they're going to solve these problems. He gets these topics by going to professional conferences and talking to physicists and chemists and biologists and psychologists and social scientists about their projects and what they're working on. And then he goes home and puts them into his books. And I found myself reading some of his books thinking, now that idea is never going to work. Go to a glacier, drill a hole, pump out the water, make the glacier readhere and slow down its glacial flow by more than 10 times, by 90%. It doesn't ever work. And I go online and Google it, and somebody's actually working on that project. There's a lot of really creative and plausible and fundable and funded projects that are going out there. The planet really can be saved, but only at a cost that we have been unwilling to pay so far. One of Robinson's books, The Ministry of the Future, follows a group of UN bureaucrats. Sounds like exciting stuff, but it really turns out to be. You know, there's car chases and murders and the whole bit that go on. So he follows those bureaucrats whose job it is to protect the rights of future generations to inherit a livable earth. Why not? Future generations are people too. They have rights too. They just haven't been born into them yet. So create a UN commission to protect their rights. And if you think about it, contrast his title, The Ministry of the Future, with McCaskill's title, What We Owe the Future. It's the similarity is no coincidence. That you have Robinson with his pragmatic, science-based, guarded optimism, and McCaskill's practical call for an ethics of what he calls long-termism as a policy. Think of long-termism. What kind of policy principle would that make, and how would that affect building our policy going out into the future? Those two things there are tools that help me maintain my own optimism and keep me from giving up on the world. That's why I must be an optimist, so I can keep getting up out of bed each morning and making another try. So that circles back into what James Luther Adams, the Unitarian theologian, used to say. Keep the faith, they say, and he redefined faith as the certainty that we can solve all our problems together, the certainty that we have everything we need to solve all our problems. Those of you who qualify for what I hope will be the next greatest generation, perhaps there are none quite that old in this room or quite that young in this room, but well, if you're younger than me, I'll look at you as the next greatest generation if you'll take up the mantle. You may not be keen to do that. I have to acknowledge that my generation, the baby boomers, and the one before it, failed to prevent global warming in the 1980s when we had a workable political coalition to do so. The ball is largely in the court of younger people now, but my generation is still not off the hook. To those of you my age and older, let us now serve as allies to the younger generations in the fight to preserve the earth for humanity and for all living things. And to everybody here and online, use the principles and the methods of ethics to re-examine your values and to make conscious choices that count about what issues you're going to work on, just like Dr. Ernst was talking about, for your remaining years. Never stop and never quit, and make your life count right up to the very last breath. That's all we get. Make it count. Life would be meaningless if we lived forever. Because, oh well, I'll just do it tomorrow. I've got an infinite number of them, right? Death is what gives our lives meaning. And maintain a reasonable optimism that's coupled with commensurate actions at any age. I refuse to say I'm glad I won't be around for the next 50 years to see what happens. To the contrary, I wish I were going to be around so I could see how the next greatest generation is going to succeed. And I'm not saying that existential problems as we've defined them are the only ones worth working for. If you value meaning in life as experienced through the appreciation or production of beauty, then I say that is exactly what you should dedicate yourself to. Besides, who is to say what is existential for one person as opposed to another, or why existential for entire humanity should be more important than for the one? That's our first principle, right? And really, it represents the tension between the first and the last, the tension between the one and the many, that they are all important. I somehow expect if you experience your life through in those ways, if you do something that, I mean, frankly, at Mesoscale Discovery, I never really worked on a, quote, existential for the whole of humanity project. It was biological sensors for individual sick people that made lives better. That doesn't make it any less important. You're always going to dig down to an ethical level of action, like conservationism or creative freedom through music or dance or art, if you're in one of these areas. At least addressing problems that have to do with reparation on the individual or the human-wide effort, either level. Either way of those is a responsible thing to do that does no harm. So in the final analysis, our ethical principles are not really the most important thing. The principles themselves, you can't eat a principle. But the most important thing is whether we live them out as Unitarian Universalists. And in seminary, as an example of that, I wrote an ethics paper where the good professor, I mean, I already had a solid B in that course, and that wasn't going to go anywhere. He had, for the final paper, he told us to choose between an ideal and a practical solution to an ethical dilemma. And my thesis, which I defended in the paper, was that neither the ideal nor the pragmatic answer was going to fully satisfy, that the point of ethical striving is not arbitrary results, it's not perfection. The point might be the process of continued growth and change. The good professor, surprisingly, told me it was the best work I had done all semester. Still got the B, and that's fine. B's get degrees, right? That's just the whole point, that process of working through that without having my eye on the goal, in fact, on what the course grade might be. The process of working through that really gave me something that I can go back here 8 years to and point to as a strength of not results orientation, but process orientation. Process orientation gets a really bad review if you Google it online and look at process orientation through the lens of business management. Oh, those people don't like process orientation. They want results. They want goals and results. There's a case for process orientation as well. And that same truth is really reflected by Emily Towns, the womanist theologian and ethicist. She writes that if we ourselves are not changed by the religious beliefs and ethics that we take on, then in leading others, we are hypocrites. And she goes on to say, the greatest work is what we must do within ourselves and in our relationships with each other, not towards a goal or an end out there. Let us continue to do the ethical work that we need to do to choose wisely and build meaningful lives, which is what we're here for. And in that way, maybe we can yet save ourselves and each other and our relationships and the world. May it be so. I'd like to ask you to stand in body or in spirit. It is hymn number 1064 in the teal hymnal, and we're going to sing all three verses. This hymn has been described as unsingable by UUs. It's in 3/4 time. We're used to 4/4 time in congregational singing. if you find yourself not getting it, just let yourself read the words and sway with the music. Think of a waltz or of cascading over the waves in the universe and sway back and forth. So go with it and follow the process and not the end. Feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, beating o'er the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. Though thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, read the infinite sea before me, sing the song, my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor nor port have I known. Wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. We have time for a few people to share, and I look forward to hearing your remarks and the congregational response. Nancy will bring her mic around. Just wave to her if you would like to share.
The problem with these ethical choices we have is they're not always so simple. It's a compromise so many times as what you have to do. And yes, to go in the right direction to hope for the betterment. But if I look around me here, the way that we could all produce less carbon dioxide would be much poorer people. The less money you spend, the less carbon dioxide you produce. Are we ready to spend less? So it's not simple choices, but at least we should be aiming toward doing the best we can for our mankind. Mankind.
There's truth in that, Harry. I'll admit I drove up here on an internal combustion engine, right? But I didn't fly. And the biggest thing we can do to cut our carbon footprint first is to swear off flying. I flew to Iceland this summer. It was the first plane I had been on since 2017, and I wanted to wait at least that long until I would go overseas again. But if it's in this country, 2025, I'm going to Vancouver to a convention. I'm driving. That cuts your carbon footprint way, way down.
I think also when we talk about the future, most of us have children, grandchildren, hope to have great-grandchildren. And we think about, I worry, about the world for them. And the Native American, the 6th generation, 7th generation.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we should do are so simple. At the last climate change meeting, believe it or not, the fossil fuel companies agreed to capture methane. They all leak methane, and it's so easy to fix. And I was just astounded that they all finally agreed to start cutting that, and also Biden demanded that American fossil fuel companies do it immediately.
So easy, yeah.
Well, it's wonderful that we have these answers staring us in the face. Unfortunately, we also have this orange-haired dumbass who is, his primary policy in being reelected is drill, drill, drill. And half of the country apparently likes whatever he says without questioning it. But the point I really wanted to make is that I think it's essential that we recognize the difference between good volunteer efforts and our life choices, because good volunteer efforts can run dangerously close to Catholic penitence. You're making up for all those other bad choices that you keep private in your own home. And when the real answer is that you lead a life that embraces joy, compassion, self-honesty, and empathy. And if you bottom out on those things most of your day, and then go to a soup kitchen on Sundays, it doesn't count.
What makes making ethical decisions so difficult is in most societies around the world is the pursuit of wealth. And I think there has to be somehow a reordering of the psychology around money, because that's, for me, what I see as a bottom line why drill, drill, drill is pursued so much.
Maybe one last.
Did we have someone online too? Okay.
The pursuit of money, that's one of the things, and when most of the young people major in business and the humanities classes are being got rid of, I'm not optimistic. When I mention that I don't eat red meat anymore, people look at me blankly. That's a methane thing. And the EV salesmen are not being trained. The car salesmen are not being trained to sell EVs. They haven't a clue. So I remain pessimistic. Sorry.
Okay, I think Bob will be here for coffee and further conversation.
Thank you for your honesty there about where you are. We are all on a path. In terms of optimism and pessimism, I wonder if this country is not more optimistic than I realized. Yesterday I read a statistic that said that according to an AP poll, 70% of the people in the United States believe in angels. And some of you, I imagine, do here too. But the interesting thing about the statistic was that just under half of the people believe in the devil or Satan. And I thought, well, that's an awfully high number, but more people believe in angels than the boogeyman. So maybe we're a little more optimistic than we thought. As we depart, Yeah, and they're all over the place. One of them stepped up yesterday to fund our new executive director's position so that that lady can pay her car payment off and get her mortgage back up to date. Gave her a gift of thousands of dollars to do that and to fund her position until we get our new grants. So because of angels with 2 feet on the ground, Justice Jobs is going to continue. As we depart this morning from this place of sanctuary and into the busyness of the coming week, let us take with us some truth, some morsel of spiritual food that presented itself to us here, and let us do and not talk about doing. Let us build beloved community within these walls, and let us sow beloved community out in the world beyond those windows. Let us incarnate the moral and ethical and religious leadership that the current moment demands of us. We're better for having spent this time together this morning. Go in peace.
A little out of order. I'm going to extinguish the chalice now. The words are in your order of service, and then Reverend Bob you have a benediction.
Well, we've already done the benediction, so we could go over the post without following.
Okay, okay. Go in peace, and please join us for coffee in the lobby.